This is a condenser water pump on an open cooling tower circuit. We're going to go through the various aspects of this installation. What do you see wrong with this installation, Keith?
Okay, there are a number of things that I see wrong with this installation. If you look at the pump unit itself, it's mounted on an inertia base. So it's a base on base with spring mounts, and you've got flexible couplings on suction and discharge. That, from a basic concept point of view, is fine. But the important thing to recognise is that pipe work should be aligned to the pump should not be aligned to the pipe work. And if we look at this pipe work, we can see that there are some loads from the pipe work that are not concentric with the centre line of the pump flange on the suction side. So what that's doing is actually putting a load on the pump flanges, which is being transferred to the spring mounts. So there's a problem there with alignment of the suction pipe work with the pump suction flange. If we look at it in a bit more detail, you can see that those flanges are not parallel. And it's showing up in the flexible coupling that's between the pipe work and the pump flange. You can also see that we haven't fitted an eccentric reducer on the suction side. So there's a potential for an air bubble to be right the way through that combination of reducer and coupling that could cause problems with the operation of the pump. Entrained air in the flow is bad news, as it can affect pump hydraulic performance. So this is bad installation of the suction pipe work, incorrectly aligned with the pump flange, putting loads on the pump flange which are being transferred to the base plate.
The building owner then purchased a new pump because the old pump had reached the end of its life, and this is the installation of the new pump set. What do you see with this, Keith?
Well, I'm not quite sure how much has changed, but this looks as though the old suction pipe work is still there. So you're still looking at this, got the situation where these pump centre lines are not exactly in line with one another. If you were to put a straight edge across there, you would probably be able to see a gap of maybe 1/8 of an inch or 6 millimetres, something like that. That tells us that the pump flanges are not lining up with the suction pipe work. The first rule of pump installation is you bring the pipes to the pump. You don't adjust the pumps to suit the pipe work. And you're seeing again that this spring here is less compressed than this one. So that says to me that there's heavier force on this end of the base plate. If we look at the discharge flange, again, we can see that those faces are not parallel. So that obviously the pump and the discharge pipework are not lining up either. And these are fundamental processes in pump installation. The pipework must line up with the pump. The pump does not line up with the pipework.
Has this been installed in accordance with the Masterflow manual?
I would presume not. If you read any pump installation guide, it would tell you that these are fundamental aspects of pump installation. And it's always the pump must have its shaft, pump and motor shaft must be horizontal, otherwise you will get out of balance forces, and that creates unsatisfactory performance of the pump. And one way of making sure that the pump and motor are horizontal is to make sure there are no loads on the pump flanges from the pipework.
Should these corrections on the pipework installation be made prior to the site alignment?
Well, that's a bit difficult to know because if you haven't got a drawing of the pump set and be able to physically align it in a drawing environment, I don't know whether anybody took measurements of where that suction connection was. But obviously, this is a pretty poor support mechanism. I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, that's the governing factor for where the pipe is. And it's clear that that pipe support is not high enough to line the flanges up. So it's a poor pipe support. The pipes must be supported independently from the pump. The pump is not there to hold the pipework up. The coupling alignment can also be affected by the load that's put on the suction flange by the pipework, because if this end of the pump goes down, as is indicated by the compressor on this spring, this end of the pump goes up. So you have to make sure, again, that the pump and motor are correctly aligned, otherwise you'll get damage potentially to the pump bearings and the motor bearings because the alignment of the coupling has not been done correctly. But you have to start off with the pump horizontal, the pump shaft horizontal, and then bring the suction and discharge connections up to the pump, not the other way around.
Do you have any comments around the discharge pipework on this application?
Well, the discharge pipework itself seems to be okay. But what we have got is the fact that the discharge flange of the pump is not horizontal. And that is caused by the fact that there's load from the suction pipework on the suction flange, which is pulling the pump down. So if you look at this and if you magnified that, you'd see that pump flanges are not parallel with one another. Okay, you can see it quite clearly that the flanges of the pump and the pipework are not parallel. The fact that we've got a rubber coupling there gets us out of trouble, but it gives us alignment issues. That's really what it's all about.
On this discharge run, we have pipework coming out of the pump, going up, then on the horizontal. It then goes down and across the plant room before it then goes back up again. Do you see any concerns around that?
I don't really have a concern with that. The important thing is to make sure there's no trapped air, because whenever you've got a loop like that, there's a potential for there being trapped air. So what you need to do is to open this air cock, bleed the air out of the system so that this pipe is totally full of fluid. Once you've done that, you can close the cock and you should be okay. So you don't want any trapped air in either the suction or the discharge line, because that will affect pump performance.